All right, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are live. If you're on, please go ahead and hit hashtag live. If you're watching the replay later, hashtag replay. My name is Coach Lois Kofi, and today we have a special edition of Healthy and Wealthy and Wise, and it's a really important day. If you saw the opening credits, you know that this is the 5th anniversary of Prince's passing, and we want this to be a celebration and a tribute to him. So I'm going to go ahead and bring on our amazing guests all the way from Minneapolis. Jesse and Rich are here in the house. I'm so excited to have you guys here.
Good
Doing
to be
awesome.
Got to be
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I realized 2 months ago that we were coming up on this anniversary, and I wanted to do something and celebrate. You know, it's been 5 years. I can't believe it. It seems like it was just yesterday. And so I wanted to, I know I met Rich, we couldn't figure it out when it was, 2009, 2010, somewhere in there, and we connected, and I found out that you had actually moved to Minneapolis for Prince, and so did Jesse. So I'm going to let you guys go ahead and share your story, and also maybe how you got to connect with Prince and a favorite memory while you're at it.
You go first.
Of course. Well, I moved to Minneapolis for Prince because I just heard his music and it just electrified me back in 2010. His first album, that was the first album I heard, 2010. And it just excited me. And as the years progressed, of course, I heard about Paisley Park. And I first went to Paisley Park in 2013, in October of that year. Prince actually reached out to me because I was so excited about him. I was making all these videos on YouTube, and he saw some of those videos of mine, and we formed a good connection. And it was like, dude, you got to move to Minneapolis. So eventually in October, I went for the first time, and obviously it was a life-changing experience. I saw him there. I saw him the year previous, or the same year earlier in the year in March, South by Southwest. That was my first Prince show because he paid for me to see him there. He arranged this amazing experience for me to get a chance to see him at the end of that show. But that was like the start of like my Prince journey from 2010 to South by Southwest to Paisley Park, and then finally moving out here in 2015, because the year like 2014, my life with Prince I spent the last 3 years of his life here at Paisley Park. I moved here 2015, but I was just a huge fan. Like it all started, like 2013 was the start of the new era with Third Eye Girl and just like the MPG with the horns and stuff. And so give or take, I've been on this journey for 10 years with Prince. So that's my brief little intro.
What started for me, I think when I was 6 in 1982, and hearing his music, definitely Little Red Corvette, trying to navigate my young self through lyrics that I've never heard, didn't know who this guy was, and living 2.5 hours away from Paisley Park, not realizing that it was just outside of Minneapolis. And so went through my teens, enjoyed his music. Nobody else did that I knew. Kind of took my private drives with album releases the night that it would come out at midnight, and just educating myself, not just from a historical perspective, but also lyrical and how it spoke to me. Then when I got to see him in December of 97, everything changed, because I realized that he would invite people out after arena shows to go to Paisley Park, and none of us knew where that was. So we ended up just driving home that night, 2.5 hours up, 2.5 hours back. Sad that I couldn't experience that. But once I got the address, once I moved up in the summer of 98, because I got accepted to a music school downtown Minneapolis, and I was going to become a recording engineer, and I wanted to work for him. But the reality is, when the liaisons told me, you might want to work with him, but you might not like getting the calls at 3 a.m, and you might not want to be out there for a week straight. So I said, okay, well, they gave me a month free for school. I stepped back, just started attending, parties, concerts out there. And I knew that's where I had to be. I was like 22, 23 years old. And I could live with no sleep and go out there at midnight or 1 a.m. And it just became a journey. And, 18 years of my life, I was going to these late night concerts, and just even a year and a half after I moved up is when I met him, but we can talk about that later.
Awesome. Yeah. And I just wanted to give a shout out to people that have been joining us, guys. Feel free to comment below if you have a favorite Prince memory, or, we're going to be covering a lot of great stuff. Alex from Minnesota, we got Scott in Mexico, and we got someone from Morocco. Med, great to see you in Morocco. We know that Prince was loved by the global community, the global world. And I kind of a funny story, you reminded of my first Prince sighting. I was 7. I was being babysat in a bar. And I was watching Purple Rain, and I still remember seeing Prince in Purple Rain, while I was being babysat in the bar and going, oh my God, I'm in love with him. I don't think I said that, but I think my spirit said that. And so I became a fan, and I remember moving to Minneapolis in 1999. And so I always kind of joked that, it was Prince's fault that I moved there that year, but it wasn't the same as you guys' stories. I'd love to hear, because you guys have such a connection with him. What is your favorite memory? Anything juicy, fun?
Oh, too many.
Right. Where do we go?
I think more than anything is when the first time that I walked into Paisley, how great it smelled. And it was the incense, the candles. The women smelled better than me. I was so intimidated to even talk to them. Everybody was beautiful. Everybody was.
You had to be on your game. I'm gonna just say, if you go into Paisley Park, please. Well, at the time when Prince was around, we always dressed to the nines, and I was just of the impression. I think everyone should be of the impression. Like Prince, he always looked good, and it's like if you come into his crib, so follow that sentiment.
It gave me the opportunity to finally bust out when I used to wear my fedora hat all the time.
Right. That's all Rich we used to wear back in the day with the fedora. And it was cool because it's like, that's Rich with the fedora.
Everybody had their little style. They would have maybe a little suit jacket, something. But yeah, he's right. Everybody dressed to the nines, and it was the place to be. But ironically, and when I took a step back, the best times that I ever had was in a suburb of Minneapolis.
All right.
It's true. It wasn't downtown. It wasn't just First Avenue. It was his house. It became my church. And we've talked about this before too, that his parents were in a church, and my parents always wanted me to go to church.
Right.
But I looked at that as my sanctuary, my healing, the place where people came together and shared the music and hugged each other, and everybody was accepted.
And ate together afterwards. Like we were really a family. Paisley Park cultivated this sense of family. All of us were really linked together because we're all there, never knowing what could happen. That was how it was always branded. You never know what may happen. And keep in mind, that could mean Prince don't show up, which happened many times over. Many stories you can think of where it's like, oh, something's happened, and then you show out and he's not even there. But even still, it's like, it's always a memory. It was always something that you knew you couldn't predict, and it always left you dumbfounded afterwards. Like, did we really experience that, or was it just a dream, or what was this experience? But it definitely allowed us to have this insatiable desire to want to be there all the time. And that's what really made me move here, because before I moved here, I was in Texas. And of course, Prince, South by Southwest, that was the only show he did. He didn't really travel there. So I was like, when am I going to see him? Like, how am I going to see this dude? And he would announce these shows randomly. A lot of times you had to, keep track with the moon, because he would likely do it on a moon cycle, a full moon or a new moon. And you just never knew. And if you missed it, it sucked. Like, it sucked to know that you missed Prince performing live, because you never knew what that performance would look like, what song he would do, what the energy would feel like. And we experienced some intense shows, and it was always just like, did we really experience it? Like, was that something that just happened? And can we have that happen again? And yeah, we were lucky because we got to see him a lot of times.
there was some times that I was driving home by myself at 5, 6 in the morning, pinching myself, and I knew that I had to work in maybe an hour or two.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, how am I going to go to sleep? And meanwhile, a lot of people had the weekends off. I have always worked weekends. And so if I could get a half-hour nap in, maybe 15 minutes, I was happy. But you could not come down from that.
It was a high, purple high for real. Like we were all so jittery. And we always went to Perkins afterwards.
And to get pancakes.
Yeah, to get pancakes. And just really be like, yo, remember the time he just went into that solo? Or remember when the band member did this or that? So we just had this insatiable desire to share and want more of it, because he, towards the last 3 years of his life, he opened Paisley Park large, in a way that he didn't do before. Because I mean, he obviously has been to Paisley many times over. Yeah. I moved out here in 2015. And before then, Prince flew me out to come out here various occasions to listen to his album Hit and Run. No, actually it was Artificial Age and Plectrum Electrum. But I knew even before I moved out here that the music scene, it's not just Prince. It's like there's bunkers, before COVID, of course, it was more lively, but it was almost an energy in the air when he was here. Like Paisley Park, you could feel it. Like it was just unmistakable. And you knew if you saw that Prince was going to Paisley Park, you was going to clear your day. It didn't matter what plans. I remember I was on a date with my girl at the time, and I was like, baby, you either come with me or I'm going to have to leave you here, because I am not missing this show, because it's just the hurt of missing Prince and seeing him perform. And that's one of my favorite memories. Like Rich said, there's so many memories to count, but I had the pleasure of actually running the teleprompter for Prince the last few months of his last band configuration, when he had Donna on guitar, Kirk Johnson on the drums, Mono Neon on bass, and he, of course, playing the guitar. And he knew that I loved just his music. So just for me to be I was obviously very nervous running the teleprompter for Prince, making sure all the lyrics are as he goes into the songs, because that's the thing with Prince, is like he could flow into his song so fast. And that's why I was committed with the job, because he knew, okay, he'll be able to know what song I'm about to go into. But so yeah, those are my favorite moments, just seeing Prince perform with the band, because he's doing solos, he's doing all kind of stuff that and Paisley Park, it almost felt like when he performed there, he performed in a very natural way. It wasn't like a stadium show, which nothing against stadium shows. If you've seen Prince, live at any time when he was around, it's a luxury. But if you've seen him at Paisley Park, it was a different feel, because the improvisation, the sound of Paisley Park. Oh,
state of the art, multi-million-dollar system.
I mean,
there will be nothing ever like that in the world. And for him to set it up in suburban Minneapolis,
right in
the middle of nowhere, with futuristic, exterior design panels that look like a spaceship, that he also called the White Mansion. I think he did a song on one of his nights. Yeah. And it was more than just a big white mansion. It was our church. But one thing I remember, I just remembered, was there was one particular night where I think it was in 1999, he was growing his hair out, and he wore these hoop earrings, and I could tell that there was commotion over my left shoulder, and I looked over, and all these people started to part the crowd, and he was wearing like a turtleneck and these obviously slacks that only Prince could wear, and he sashayed with his little walk, with his high heels on, sparkly, and he just split the room, and everybody just kind of stepped back and said, "Oh my God!" Everybody got quiet while the DJ was playing the music, and he could walk the room, and everybody would give him space. Yeah. You could also feel when he was by you. You could turn around and he could disappear. But
that's not a lie either. I mean, it's many cases where he would be behind you, and then he wouldn't within a second or so.
You could feel him always. And then when you would get on stage, everybody got silent and
right. It's not like at Paisley. It's not like at a big show where someone's drunk and they're like 17 days or pre-purple. Everyone at Paisley Park, it's a reverence type of thing. He would get on stage, everyone's just like, what is he going to do? And just, we would surrender to whatever that feeling. But ultimately, he wanted us to dance. He wanted us to have a good time.
I usually didn't dance. I would sit like a wallflower just in awe. But the other thing that we should point out is that during those days, in all the days, any electronic equipment, phones, in later years when things got, the smartphones, everything was banned. You were in the moment with him. He wanted you to be there. He encouraged that. He even would say that in arena shows, but people would break the rules.
Right.
But the fact that you were present in his house and he was taking you to church every night. And if he didn't, if we like you said, we didn't know what to expect, but we were along for the journey, and we would stay there until the sun came up. We didn't care. When the lights went up, that's when we had to go home. But he gave us so many brilliant shows and so much joy over the years. And that's what I choose to celebrate every day, not just on a day like today. Everybody should be playing his music every day, not looking to like the milestone years of 1 year, 5 year, 10, 20. If he's in your life, and he has been in your life, or if you can share his music with someone else to get them in their life, we've done our job as Purple family.
Right.
And that's what he would want. And we're still talking about him, and he's still bringing people together. And that's the beautiful thing, is that we're carrying on his legacy somehow, some way, just even talking about it today.
I love that. You guys reminded me of a couple of my favorite stories. I never had the pleasure. I had invites, but I chose motherhood and sleep over going out to Paisley. And my kids are like, Mom, that was stupid. Why didn't you go? We would have been okay. But I remember Oprah asking him, why Minneapolis? And he's, why do you live there? And, he was diehard Minneapolis, right? And he said, it's so cold, it keeps the bad people out.
Anyway, look, I'm from the South, and I understand why he said that in a sense, because maybe, he was born here, but it's cold. I'm a good guy, and I've become a bad guy because of the cold. So I don't know what that theory, kind of where that falls on. It's like, it's cold here. No one wants to, the idea of me coming out here was really because the music hit me that hard. Like, it hit me hard. Because my background, coming from a religious family who we didn't really listen to any music outside of gospel Christian music. So when I finally opened my ears to more than that, Prince was like a universe for me, like a universe. It was beyond the earth. It was the galaxies, the stars. And I love that it was so contradictory, because it was spiritual, but it was sexual. And usually those two things don't mix. Like you're talking about the Lord's Prayer with the bikini. It's Prince. Like, he'll do something like that. It's like, that's a contradiction, but he didn't mind those contradictions. He actually welcomed them. And so it's like the whole Prince thing, for a lot of people, it starts in different places. It doesn't matter where you start. I started it when I was 18. Some people remember, 6, as soon as they were born. But he gets you when you really listen and you connect beyond the surface, beyond the purple. It's like I was speaking earlier. I think we all relate to purple. I'm wearing a purple thing, for God's sakes. But still, it's all about the kaleidoscopic aspect of him, because Prince wore all colors. If you look at his career, he wore everything, which means it's like he gave you a bit of this, a bit of that. And
I think he even shocked people when he came out in orange.
Right.
At the Grammys.
At the Grammys. I love that.
And he had those beaded.
Right.
But only he could have done that. And he had his, his diamond encrusted cane out there, and he shut the room down, and he was only there to present an award to Beck.
Right.
And everybody was just on their feet, bowing down, because they hadn't seen him on a stage like that for a while. I think it was that 2013 Grammys, I believe, when
2015.
His afro was coming into shape, and it was almost like a full circle too. Just
exactly. And that's
not just with the glasses, but like from the Purple Rain era, but when he started out as a kid and got his first record deal, he had a big afro, and cut his hair off through all the years between albums, but to return to his look that got him a record deal, and to let it
leave
go
on that. I don't think that was an accident. I feel like that was intentional. because Prince pretty much planned everything in his life.
Mhm.
I mean, there's no way you look at all the different faces of Prince, all of the different outfits, all the different flavors of music, and not see somebody completely determined to structure their career to his demands. I mean, that's what made him different. Prince was not afraid to tell the label, the record industry. I mean, his first record, you have Earth, Wind & Fire, some of the best producers of all time. In fact, I think Earth, Wind & Fire is the best band of all time. They wanted to produce Prince's record. He said, no, I love you, Earth, Wind & Fire. I love you, Maurice White, but you can't produce my record. And that says a lot. Being that determined continually throughout his career, and fighting also for the notion of that, saying that, you know, independent artists have to own their own record. Do not let the label own it, because if the label owns it, you're a slave. I mean, he didn't mind making those risks. And I wasn't around in the 90s, but from what people tell me, people thought he was crazy. You know, he changed his name to a symbol. It was kind of like, why are you doing this? Why are you going so far with this point? And he ended up being the last one laughing, because that's what we all see now. No one wants to be signed to a label. Well, a lot of people, if not having that education, may do it. But if you really know how the system works, no, you want to do it on your own, because you don't want someone else taking most of the profit and just exploiting you in other ways. So, I mean, that kind of foresight, he was definitely a seer in so many ways.
Awesome. Hey, just got a shout out to Tracy Brinkman in Wisconsin, who loves Prince. Thanks, Tracy, for being here. My last podcast guest last week. If you guys haven't seen his show, you guys mentioned pancakes, and I remember Chappelle. Did he ever talk about Chappelle and the pancake story?
Well, he did have the breakfast experience. It was October 2013.
You went to that show,
yeah, and we came out. I think it was a later entry into the park, but served pancakes around 5 a.m. We thought it was a joke that he was going to do it, but he went on late, played late. Everybody, that wasn't the pajama night, was it? That was another.
I wasn't at that show, and that was another moment where I was like, man, what? Like, because he did this show shortly after the first Prince show I went to, which was October 5th, the October Surprise with the MPG. And that show was amazing, especially because after the show, he also did a private show that I was a part of, because Joshua Welton, who was Hannah's husband, he took me aside and he was like, you know, bring some of your friends and we're going to go into this Studio A, or it was Studio B, I believe. And Prince did a short show. He did 2 songs, but it was amazing. I mean, it was just like life-changing, because it was just 50 of us in this room. He had all gold on, and he actually told me at that time that he brought his guitar for me, which I was really happy, because my first Prince show, he didn't play guitar, and I love Prince on guitar. It's my favorite thing. And as happy and excited as I was to see Prince for the first time, he did not perform guitar. So I was like, I mean, I told him how happy I was. And I'm like, why didn't you perform guitar? You know, so, but he told me, in his words, the band was on point. I didn't have to. And he was right. I mean, the band was really great. But this second time I seen him at Paisley Park, and I see him in this small little space. He has this guitar, and it just blew my mind. But that was the only guitar he played at that time. So about 2 weeks later, he did this breakfast experience, what Rich is talking about, and he played guitar the whole. I mean, that show. I mean, you guys have to suffer outside in the cold for a while. I mean, for a long time. I want to say it was really cold, but he did an amazing show, and I missed that show, and I was pissed.
so many events that he had in October. He had something with that month he loved, but I also remember from those October shows in 2013, he actually merged 2 bands together between his Third Eye Girl that was formed in late 2012, that debuted at the Dakota Jazz Club in January, and that he played 6 shows in 3 nights, 2 sets each night. And they were still building on that, but them to merge with the MPG horns, and there was probably 20 some musicians on stage.
So many people on stage.
It was like the only other person I can think that had that many on there was either George Clinton in the Parliament Funkadelic, or Fela Kuti, that would have sometimes like 30, 40, 50 band members in the 70s, and I would hear about that. Yes. But it was mind-blowing to just, it was overstimulation, but there was so much talent at one stage, and so like top notch, then you know that he was going to bring up the best in all of them. And we were treated barely. I mean, even the entry fee was probably, I don't know, $20-$30 back then, but we still had, he'd perform for 3, 4, 5 hours. And we always, I mean, it wasn't even about the money. We got our money's worth,
Right.
But it was about the experience and to see the top notch musicians throughout the years that he surrounded himself with. Or, you know, if you wanted to do solo, like his final tour, like the last time that we saw him perform a set on January 21st, 2016, which was life-changing
Absolutely
by itself. But even at that time, for him to come full circle and finally actually do a concert for or by himself in the revealing, the naked aspect of him stripping everything down to a piano, that was
life-changing.
Yeah, it was the best night of my life, straight up. So if I had to pick a best memory, it probably would have been that, other than the fact the night that I met him a year after I moved up. But still, when it comes down to the configurations of the stages in each room and any given moment, any given year, he pulled you in, and it was family. It was he knew who loved him and who wanted to be close to him and feel that, because he wanted to share that energy. And that's what we would walk away from, just feeling better. And and like I always say, it always felt like I was going to church, and that the dollars at the door that we gave was our donation, and the people in the house under his Paisley Park, the roof was the congregation, and he would take us. But you know, I never, even growing up Catholic, I kind of pushed that away because I was a rule breaker, but I wanted to. That was my therapy for years, and I still wish I could be experiencing that, because it was the best feeling in the world to have that, and also talk to the musicians afterwards, because they were all good people. He surrounded himself with the best kind of people that would mirror his talents and everything he could write for. It just, that we miss it. There's nobody like him.
Yeah, I definitely put Minneapolis on the map. And I know we all remember this. I put this question on the screen. Yeah. I'd love for you guys to share. I know I was in Disney World, which sucked because I didn't want to be there anymore. It was the Buzz Lightyear ride. My husband sent me a text message, and I wanted to get on a plane to Minneapolis at that point. I stayed up till 3 a.m. crying my eyes out. But anyway, do you guys want to share where you were and what that day was like for you?
I was in New Zealand at the time, because I left. Yeah, I was doing a lot in 2015, 2016. I actually told Prince I was going to New Zealand because I was working for him at the time, of course. And I said, you know, I'm going to New Zealand for 3 months. I was doing this project called Characters in the Wind. And he's like, all right, I'll see you when you get back. And even before he passed away, he did one impromptu show on the 16th of April. And they called me and they asked if I can do tours, because I was doing tours at the time. And I was like, I'm not in the States yet. I'll be back in a month. Or actually, at that time, it was about 2 weeks. So I wasn't able to go to that. So a good friend of mine called me and just told me, did you see? I'm like, what? And then, of course, it all followed through, and I was able to get the information, and it just, the surreal feeling of it all. But I think what happened for me shortly after that was me really piecing together all of the memories and how I saw, like what Rich mentioned from the beginning, he had the afro, and then in the end, he had the afro. And then if you listen to the albums he did before he passed, there were a lot of songs that even at the time, I remember when we all listened to him, we felt some kind of way. He released a song called Way Back Home. And that song, I remember just being in the Prince community, everyone just felt conflicted about that, because it felt so, it's like, Prince doesn't want to be here. He's talking about death. He's talking about dreams. All these things sort of felt relating to transcendence, really. And he even used that word a lot often towards the end, transcendence. And so I pieced together everything. It's like, you know, Prince gave his whole life to us through his music, his whole life. And he shared the last 3 years, if you were in Minneapolis, you were able to be at Paisley Park. You were able to see him even more intimately. We saw that piano and microphone 2016, January 21st. I don't think not one person in that room did not cry at some point, because it was so overwhelming. Like, all of us were in this together, seeing Prince perform with just the piano, giving his whole story. Both shows he told us just how he developed his art. And it was father. Like, he talked about his father and just bringing it back to love, bringing it back to what it's all about. So it was like understanding grief. I was like, I understand why because, of course, after he passed away, the world went to shit. Everyone can know, 2016, Trump came in, and then everybody just started going crazy. And Prince, pretty much, like I said, I believe he was a seer. He saw that and he's like, I'm gone. Like, I'm not.
Peace out.
Right. Peace. So, but he left such a legacy. And again, this is something that's unfolding. So it's not like it ever stops, really. Like, he's very much still here through his music.
I remember going to, I knew I had to go to work that day at noon, and I woke up, and I'd always go down like a mile on the road to get my coffee. And I came back, and on Facebook, someone, I think it was for Carver County Sheriff page or something, it was just a vague statement that it said, middle-aged male found unresponsive at Paisley Park. And I was thinking, I'm like, who could that be? Could it be, did he have a middle-aged male bodyguard, assistant? Was it his band member? Could it be anybody? Could it be a groundskeeper? I don't know. But they're not. For a second, I thought it was him.
Right. And that was what it was for me, like, too. When I heard that portion, I'm like, well, it ain't Prince. Like, I literally put it on people who they shall go unnamed. But I was assuming all of these other people, but I'm like, it ain't Prince. It ain't Prince. Can't be. I was thinking about what he had planned for the summer. 2016, we were privy to knowing he was going to have these summer parties. So I was so looking forward to the summer, because it was supposed to be just so much activity. And so I would say most of us we're like, nah, it ain't Prince. No way.
I remember coming back I was sipping my coffee, and the news started to break, and it went national. And I checked on multiple news outlets, CNN, and that was the first header that I saw that had his name attached to it. And I still was in shock, and I was expected still to go to work. And I just sat there and I just bawled for, felt like hours. But I remember I got in the shower, went to work, still crying. They said, do you need to go home? And I go, yes. And I sat in the parking lot of Lifetime Fitness, and the current radio station immediately changed their programming over and started playing his music.
I remember.
And I just sat, I couldn't move. I sat there for an hour and incapacitated. I couldn't eat, couldn't think, nothing. And I ultimately drove home. I went in and I laid down on the couch, and my puppies knew that there was some hurt, and they sat on my chest, and they just looked at me. They're kind of licking the tears off there. And I said, this can't be real. This can't be, this is not true. We just saw him like days ago, and he was talking about the future, and to save your prayers. But even when the rescheduled shows, the final shows in Atlanta, and the word was going out that he had the flu, and then emergency plane stopping in Moline, Illinois, and everything is all right. Don't worry. We just wanted him to rest, but we still couldn't wrap our head around what, even days later after that news came out. So it's I'm still in shock that I always told myself, he's on a long tour. There was a period of time where I didn't see him for 5 years because he was living in LA and then performing in Las Vegas and maybe out in Florida too. in the mid 2000s. And it's not a way to deal with it realistically, but I just told myself, he's on an extended tour. I'll see him again one day. And hopefully in heaven or wherever he is, he's got the best band in the world right now.
Right.
But let's hope that he's still showing signs to all of us in different ways. And it was immediate, not just the day that he passed and everybody went out to Paisley Park to put something on the memorial fence and how it was raining and there's a purple glow. I couldn't go out there for 3 days. And it was my birthday week that week on the 26th. I finally mustered up to go out there at the evening of the 24th. And it was just me and maybe 5 other people. And of those 5 was like 2 flight attendants that were on a layover. And we just talked, an umbrella in hand, took a few photos, and I said goodbye. And I felt him, with there's the solemn, the feeling of it too, just like how perfect it kept raining. It kept raining.
Right.
It was like the sky was crying, but we were still mourning. We figured that he was just beyond that gate, that he was just, recovering or something.
Right.
But
the skies were purple. The skies literally turned purple. It was so weird.
That was like a real thing. I mean, it was just the rainbow came out. It's like Prince was definitely connected to spirit. I mean, you can't really doubt that.
He's orchestrating things from the sky still and pulling strings, and we still feel it. And I think he's either shaking his head or he's smiling down, or maybe both.
Both.
But he knew, like I say all the time, he knew who his true family was. In those final years that we were there, those people that showed up, whether it was 10, 20, 30 people, he knew just by looking out who his real family was. And we felt honored to share those, and knowing that he was moving ahead to include more people internationally and make big plans, and literally saying on a final band tour with the Third Eye Girl, when he was playing gigs in London, for example, he said, next time I want to see y'all, I want to see y'all at my house. You're all invited. But we were hoping that he would give those people notice so they could actually fly and not drop $1,000 for a plane ticket. All we had to do is drive 20 minutes out to the burb, But yet, big plans he was making, obviously. But when we also found out that he was going to play the opening concert for not the U.S. Bank, the
Super Bowl. Was he going to play at the Super Bowl, I think? Or
there was a hunch that he would, because that was coming up in a year or two.
That's right.
And most likely he would have been chosen for the first time as a repeat artist, but in his hometown, which made sense. But I think where the Vikings played when that stadium opened, he was scheduled to be the first musical act.
Yeah.
Instead, I think Metallica played, which ironically was my first concert in 1991, wearing a flannel. And I wouldn't see Prince until 1997. So my musical journey was all over the place, but it would have been amazing to see him in a big arena like that if the sound would have been good, and he would have made it good.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say a couple of questions from the audience, if you don't mind. Which Prince song inspires you the most? Whether that's your favorite or which one inspires you the most was a question asked by the audience.
Ooh, inspired.
And that's hard.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the mood. That's a very generic answer, but it truly depends on the mood. I mean, if you're somber, I love listening to Prince instrumental albums. News, Expectation are 2 of the most brilliant albums. Any of the Madhouse albums. I really just love listening to jazz improvisational Prince. The Rainbow Children is among my favorite eras.
Deeply spiritual album. Yeah,
I love the spiritual, reflective songs in which Prince is kind of pissing people off.
No, he didn't do that ever, right? He never did that.
He did that all the time. A lot of people don't even listen to Prince, honestly. I mean, truthfully, and I don't blame them, because this man made so much music. We're never gonna, I had to tell this to a friend, you're not gonna listen to all of Prince's music. You're not. Like the stuff that's released or even unreleased, like me and Rich, not shy to say, we wear our boots, right?
Yep.
And we know that there's a lot of Prince music, but that's not even scratching the surface. So you kind of have to go to what you are feeling, because he has so much type of music, and it's not really about a favorite. It's because really all of it.
It's a mood. Yeah,
it's a mood. It's like what you feeling. You feeling sad? You feeling angry? Play some Gold Experience. You know, you feeling sexy? Play some Scandalous. It's all about, and that's why it's hard for a lot of people. They don't know where to start. So I would always go to start where you're what you generally like, and then go from there.
I got my answer. I remember one of the first times I heard the song Cream, and the lyrics that I always embrace was "Break the rules because you are the best." But we now know later in life that you wrote that while looking in the mirror.
Right.
And he divulged that detail during the musicology acoustic set somewhere. I think it was in New York or something.
Yeah.
And he talked about that. And he's like, of course you wrote that while looking in the mirror. And everything about that song. And I remember how much the album with the symbol album with 7 on there lyrically, it blew my mind. I'm like, what is he talking about?
Right.
And it was a journey that, one song did not sound like the other. And this is coming from one man. And so my teen years absorbing that and trying to wrap my head around the complexity of his lyrics, and also the journey then we have loved, him and I, with the Rainbow Children. It was a journey that it was within a year or two after he adopted or went on a journey with Jehovah's Witness with the mentor of Larry Graham, on stage with him, finally performing. A lot of things shifted only a couple of years after I even moved up to Minneapolis. And I was glad to see this journey all these years that I knew my teen years. Now this is my 20s, and things change, obviously, musical taste throughout any decade in someone's life. And I just started, going back and digging into past bootlegs, because live recordings reveal a lot about him too. He never does the same song twice.
Yeah.
And if you expect something to sound like the album version, forget it. It's a journey that we're always willing to take. But collecting bootlegs and even bootleg vinyl and CDs, and it was a global thing. He's the most bootleg artist in history. And people love that, but they wanted more. That's why they would buy it, or they would trade, or they wanted to get into his head of what seeing him live after an after show, like somewhere at 3 a.m. would be. And that was another journey, and I was willing to take it. So there's so much that inspires a different year, a different decade of my life. And we're still going on it because we're still digging into the vault, and who knows, I could have a different answer tomorrow.
I know that is the challenge. I think I put that on my Facebook page, and everyone was like, no, I can't pick one.
Yeah, I know.
Here's
How Come You Don't Call Me Anymore, because it was my favorite piano ballad, and that came out in 1982. It was added to 1993 hits and B-sides. I thought it was brilliant. I'm like, I want to hear more piano.
Right.
I know the guitar. I know everything else that I thought I did. But him on the piano and the ballads that he did, not just that one, but Adore and so many other ones that threw you into another stratosphere. And like I said, it comes down to the lyrics and what he made you feel, and what you wonder what was in his head, but you could get into his head through that space and time. Those 3, 4, 5 minutes of a beautiful musical, a journey. And so yeah, it can change, but we're deeper than the average fan with knowing other catalogs that exist out there too.
Yeah, there are kind of tiers. I hate to be like that, but in the Prince community, there are people who feel like, okay, if you don't know about this amount of music, then you're not really a Prince fan. And I know that can bother a lot of people, but the truth is, if you have heard now Prince has like 39 or 40 studio albums?
About 40 with this July,
right.
I think.
All right. So 40 studio albums, that's a lot. But what happens is at some point, if you listen to whatever, it just clicks and you go through that like, I mean, multiple times over. So it's not like you just listen to it and it's like, okay, the next thing. Album can just get you for a long time. And so, yeah, just following up on what you were saying, I think it's really just that the nature of finding what you like the most.
I saw that question about the film.
I thought I'd bring that up now. I know we were going to potentially close with this topic, but Eileen asked, will there be a documentary of his life? So do you want to talk about what's coming up?
Yeah, there's a few things that I'm aware of that one of which I participated in. We heard a couple of years ago that Netflix was going to do a multi-part documentary. And originally there was a tie-in with director Ava DuVernay to be the director on that project. She walked away. We don't know the reasons. But what I was involved in that started in, because I live in North Minneapolis, and I live within blocks of a lot of childhood homes of where Prince grew up and played and jammed and rehearsed. So in March 2018, an international film crew came to Minneapolis, and they hired me to be kind of the point man, the archivist, the person on the ground to show locations that were integral to his childhood and him coming up. And so at that point, they would come in every few weeks, every few months to get a lot of footage, as well as interview so many people that were early mentors to his life, including Spike Moss and in good longtime friends, Q Bear, that works at KMOJ in North Minneapolis, that I got to meet the first time 3 years ago. And a great man, all great men. But also some other women that I'd never heard of that were close to even Andre Simone's parents and family, and the people that were growing up in the late 50s and 60s in that part of North Minneapolis when the race riots broke out in 1967 that he personally witnessed that shaped him as a man. So this film that we did, we ended up wanting to call it Mr. Nelson on the North Side, focus on his roots of where he came up and who was there to give him an outlet, a place to jam, a place to rehearse, a place to be free and welcome, and a little bit of a shelter, a little, safe haven. And that place that was co-founded by Spike Moss. I can't remember the other co-founder, but they called it The Way. And in the documentary, Spike is going to talk about that in greater length. But I was there the day that he was interviewed in March 2018. And I sat across the table in this big boardroom and just absorbing this knowledge that I had no idea, because I was born in 1976. Prince was born in 1958. He already got a lot of years on me at that point, but I was going to be years away from learning what North Minneapolis meant to his life, and I was glad to be a part of the journey. So it's out of love, it's out of respect. All the proceeds from the film is going back into a couple community. It's one of them is Hopewell Charity, and there's another one too. But they're trying to get this momentum build to relaunch The Way, to have yet now in this generation a new location for the youth of the North Side to have a place, not just to learn music, but a safe place to be, just to be. And with all this that's going on in Minneapolis, obviously it's been a tough week. I think we talked about it before we went on air. And this in the news of, or the anniversary of today, and we all felt like Prince is watching out over us and what he would have done if he was still here in these times of the Black Lives Matter movement, and what he would have done for our community, even during the pandemic, to keep us, together, to keep us sane. And it's hard to know, but flash forward, at least those stories that I learned, and from those people that were his mentors, are stunning. So it's a 90-minute film. They're gonna it's debuting this Saturday, April 24th. I think I can't remember, it's 7 or 8 p.m. Central, but
Is it on the website, on the northside.com? Do they have the time on there, you think?
You can buy your digital pass, still today, tomorrow. And I know there was some panel discussions, bonus footage that was happening if you bought your ticket before today. That's going on pretty much right now or within the next hour. But everything launches virtually this Saturday night.
Okay, cool. So anyone, anywhere could go to onthenorthside.com.
Yep. All the information will be there. There's a nice little bio, the backstory of, what to expect basically, and why we did what we did. But the film crew, California-based, South Carolina-based, two members of producers in Toronto couldn't be here because of the COVID variant keeping them in lockdown. They can't leave. We can't go to Canada either. So that's why it's all going to be streamed virtually. And we're happy with how it turned out. I'm excited to see the final cut. I've only seen some footage a couple of years ago, but they tightened everything up, and they have the key players that need their stories to be told that have never been told. So I'm really excited for other people to hear and learn about a young Prince and how he came up.
That's so awesome. Yeah. So if you guys you're listening to this in iTunes later, and just go to onthenorthside.com. I'll make sure to put that in the show notes. Well, I know we're in the home stretch, guys, and I had two really big questions to finish out. I know you actually started touching on this, and I totally agree with you. I believe when Prince left, it was divine timing, because there's been so much racial tension and just different things. I mean, I used to live in the neighborhood where George Floyd was killed. And what do you think Prince would have done? I mean, he wrote that song about Baltimore after Freddie Gray died. Right. I mean, do you have a sense of if he was still here, what he would have been doing for the Minneapolis community, specifically George Floyd, and then now the Dante Wright death, who I think his funeral was today?
Yeah.
You can go.
Well, I think Prince would have united us with his music. A lot of people don't know, but in fact, that song Baltimore, funny story about that is I got a call, and that call was I was given the song Baltimore to release on SoundCloud. And I just remember being so surprised. It was like 3 a.m. and his manager called me, and they're like, go to Prince twitter.com//3EG, Prince 3EG. And I'm his first follower. I know a lot of people, you would have to go really scroll way down to check that. But I remember being one of the first people to follow him on Twitter when he released the song Baltimore, which of course was about Freddie Gray and Michael Brown. And Prince has always had consciousness. I mean, he was an African man living in America, so he knew what it was like to have those tensions. And I think his recent song, Welcome to America, which is soon going to be an album, is a great testament and reflection of how Prince perceived the nature of American society. He's written so many songs about it. And I think his premise was simply that we organize together and build collectively and not rely on, continual systems that oppress us. And again, the music, like his most recent song, I would encourage everyone to listen to Welcome to America. It's like, in a way, it's like someone would say, oh, Prince saw into the future, but it's not just that. It's also the system hasn't changed. And unfortunately, we're repeating the same cycles because the issue hasn't really been dealt with correctly. And obviously Prince's galvanizer was the music. And so even with the May 23rd, when he did the show for Freddie Gray, he asked everyone to go to who went to Pace Park to wear gray. And that show was one of the best shows ever. He did Dreamer. It's one of the best performances of Dreamer that's ever been done. But that song in itself, again, that song was released in 2009. And even then, Prince was talking about the government giving bailouts to corporations and stuff. So it's like, if people really listen to his music, he says, I was born on the same plantation of the red, white, and blue. I never knew I was different until Dr. King was on a balcony lying in a bloody pool. I mean, this is something that Prince has always been vocal about. So I would encourage people to just listen to his music, especially later stuff, but even in the 90s, like from the beginning, even in Mountains, Prince.
I love that song.
Yeah. A lot of people, it's like Prince is even saying in Mountains, he's like, Africa divided is enough to make your mind lose your mind, which is, again, a reference to the apartheid, what was going on in South Africa. So Prince was just always conscious of these type of things. And I don't know why this surprises a lot of people when they hear these type of things, because it's like, dude's been talking about it the whole time. Y'all just focused on the 80s and the Purple Rain, and he looks cool, and he's the very Purple Rain. It's like, listen to his music. He's actually saying a lot of stuff, and he's offering solutions. I mean, he was a Jehovah's Witness, and he was a spiritual man. So a lot of his solutions were sort of centered in the unifying love of humanity and passion of us galvanizing together. But we can learn a lot from that. He always said we're in this together. And I think that's the best way of saying it. We're all in this together. So we must learn how to love each other, how to deal with each other, learn about each other's histories, have a political education so we're not confused.
I think also for a timeline purpose, he wrote Dreamer 1 year or maybe a year and a half before that Welcome to America album that was shelved for a decade.
That's right.
That's coming out. So he was already ahead of his time and talking about these themes that we didn't know that he was shelving. He told me a couple of years ago, he had a conversation with him about that, I think 2010, 2011, because I think Prince told me he had multiple albums, and he asked him, why don't you put them out? And people just weren't ready for that. And I don't think the world was ready for it. But I do remember when he had the dance rally for peace at Paisley in May of 2015, and then days later booked an arena show in Baltimore. I think all of those proceeds went back to the community. And so he did a massive concert for free. I don't know how much he actually raised for.
That was a lot.
Yeah. And
that's I'm glad you mentioned that. And just one point I would like to mention is my last meeting with Prince was about community, peer-to-peer distribution. Prince had all of these innovative ways of distributing his music, of course, online. He was one of the first artists to sell his albums. And then towards the end, he actually had his fans sell the albums. He gave me a box of CDs my last time meeting him, and he was like, follow me. And we went into the studio room, and we were just talking, and he was telling me about how we are the new power generation and how he's released those albums already, and that we don't really need to rely on him because his work is already done essentially, and that we must continue it on. And so this peer-to-peer distribution, a lot of people in Minneapolis was able to capitalize off of that and really get the music out to a bunch of people before Prince actually ended up selling the album in different streaming platforms. So he was just always ahead, and he was always about the music being in the hands of the listener and not feeling, because even in that show that he did in Baltimore, one of the things he said was, when I come back, I want to stay in your hotel. I want to eat at your restaurants. Kind of like with your podcast, Healthy and Wealthy and Wise. It's kind of like Prince, his definition of that is reinvesting in the community so that the people own and control instead of, someone else coming in and taking the lion's share of the profit.
And I also think that if he was still here, he would have done a benefit concert somewhere, somehow. Whether it was outdoors, whether we had to be bundled up, I don't care. I think he was immune to any, weather. He would have wear a big fuzzy purple coat or something. But if he would have found a place to safely distance or go live stream, he would have donated all the proceeds, and it would have been a global streaming event, no doubt. If he would have done that. But there was a joke, a meme that went around that. Last year, it said that Prince would have probably done 7 albums during this pandemic alone, just by in quarantine. But he could have done anything, for the community, and he would have done something in that name. And I feel that it was never about the money in those final years, because to his point about the peer-to-peer, he wasn't looking to, flip a massive profit at all. He was just want to get in the hands of people, but he wanted to get in the hands of the right people, the people that could actually benefit from the community, because he was always about that. And there's other things that, I don't know if we're going to run out of time, but other things that he donated to Minneapolis, community ventures, that was silent for decades. He didn't want that. He didn't want the celebrity attached to the donation. Everything was anonymous. He saved musical programs in grade schools around the community, not just Minneapolis, but coast to coast. And he donated musical equipment, or he single-handedly helped build recording studios for people that wanted to come up and maybe cut an EP so they could get at least like a pro bono situation, a few songs professionally recorded in one of those places in South Minneapolis called Urban Ventures that I got to go to. And I'm like, he donated tens of thousands, in even through a charity, Love for One Another. 15 years ago, in a 2-year span, he donated 1.5 million that helped go back into making sure that young musicians came on up had a place, but nobody knew it was him.
That's awesome. Yeah, we're not necessarily running out of time. I just remember you saying you had to go get dinner soon. So
he likes food more than me. So
go get yourself some pancakes. But I just wanted to say a couple more things before I ask you the final question. Just guys, remember, if you see value in this opportunity and what we're sharing tonight, please hit the share button with your community. And we really appreciate you guys taking the time, Jesse and Rich, to be here to share in the life and the memories. And I know we could probably go for another 5 hours. And I do know that you sort of already answered this last question. This is how I close every show. And you can take your time, however much time you want, because there's health and wealth and wisdom. Like when I think of Prince, I know he was very health conscious. And obviously you talked about wealth, giving a lot of money away. And he had a lot of innate wisdom. But if he were here on this podcast right now, and I know the purple streak in your screen, that's Prince right there. Do you know what he would say? My closing question for all my guests is always, when you hear the phrase healthy and wealthy and wise, what does it mean to you? So if you guys want to answer it individually, and then what do you think Prince would say other than what you've already shared, which was perfect?
Well, at least for me, all of those things work together. I think if you want to be healthy, wealthy, and wise, you have to be on a united front within your intentions and what that looks like. And for Prince, he was all about funk. He would always be like, if you can describe it, it's not funky. That was his motto. So I think for me, healthy means doing whatever I can to stay. For me, I love to sew buttons. I love to read. I love to write. I love to organize against systems of oppression. So for me, it's just being involved in a process that would always allow me to maintain that passion, because I get a lot of passion out of reading and writing and sewing. And I think that in return, I feel healthier. And the wealth is not necessarily always monetary. It's more so just the flavor and it's like when you're eating a good meal and it's like, oh, that tastes so good. That's how it feels for me when I'm involved in the process that I know is going to eventually work out. And that's what Prince did his whole life. He disciplined himself to perform music his whole life. He never stopped, really. And that discipline alone, it's like, yeah, Prince was a genius and a prodigy, but he also made sure he went through the work to ensure that possible. So yeah, he was willing to do the work. And that's what it's always about. Like, are you willing to do the work? Like, if you're willing to be healthy, wealthy, and wise, obviously that means you have to make decisions that would allow that to be the reality. And that might mean sacrificing whatever needs to be sacrificed. But of course, it'll be for your benefit, because that's what needs to be done. So yeah.
Awesome.
Good answer. Thank you. Good night. We
Prince would have said that.
Exactly. Yeah. You would do that sometimes, walk off the stage. But we all knew that he ate very well and took care of his body. I know that in the final years, with the connection to the People's Organic chefs that were out there, they were taking care of him. And we come to know that even one of his favorite little snacks at midnight was this vegan crispy bar. It was like peanut butter and chocolate, and that was his energy boost. And he always had a sweet tooth. Everybody come to find that out too. We're all guilty for that, but he ate so much better than I ever could, and he always had the best chef. So I think his wealth helped him get those top-notch people to keep him healthy. So he, invested in himself as much as that he gave away. But the people, like I said, even with musicians, he surrounded himself with the best, and hopefully everybody with the best intention to be there for him as well as him for them. It's a deep, question to answer, but even before I came to Minneapolis, I was going to dietitian school. I wanted to learn how to educate myself, how to eat better, and also educate other people how to eat better. And that was a journey, not just in the science aspect of food for me, and realizing that he ate very well. It was an envious situation. And I always wondered why he always stayed so damn skinny. And I always wanted to eat well to look good, because it was your skin. It was how, how it looked. Everybody that didn't invest in their the good knowledge of taking care of their body, they didn't look good. And I always wanted to do the right thing for my body, but also I kind of learned from him as an kind of a mentor, where if he looks this good and he can turn back the clock, and if I eat well, hopefully I can still look young when I'm in my 40s like I am now. And
plus you gotta grow the afro. Make sure you grow.
And you would have to stop counting time, because that's one thing exactly. Prince did not do. He didn't acknowledge birthdays and all that. Like, I don't celebrate that. That's the reason I look the way I do, because I don't.
It was some interview that, I mean, in concert one time he said time is a trick.
Right.
But also in an interview one time he said that, I look this good. He's like, I stopped counting time.
Right.
All the years and stuff. And so people were laughing, but it was true. When you stop focusing on dates and birthdays, he always said there was one birthday. Right. That's all we had. It's true. Mm-hmm. But when everybody obsesses about getting older and celebrating on that birthday, they're looking back and go, oh, I feel old. It's all in the mind.
Right.
So that's the wealth and that's the health, in my opinion. Right there is like how you think, how you treat your body, how you live your life. That's more than the wealth that you need. You don't need, the money. It's just how you live your life. And he lived his life on his own terms and
free. He was free.
Yeah.
And again, the song for you all to listen to, if you haven't heard from Prince, Free Yourself. One of the last, actually it is the last single he released officially. And it's a hell of a statement. He's saying, love yourself so that we can love you too.
Yeah.
We need your help. There's so much work to do.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. I mean, we got a lot of work to do. If we want to really do something about the world and its mess, we got to clean it up. Nobody gonna clean it up for us. So Prince did his best to clean it up with his music. He gave us a plethora of forever memories. And again, so many people like me and Rich can testify to what it's like to say, I'm going out my way to connect. Because this is a family thing. It's like, I know Rich would be a brother for me the rest of my life. I'll know him forever because of Prince. Just like you would know whoever you would meet, and you can connect with someone because of that glue that holds them together. So it's really amazing to see those connections can really remain.
But he brought us together.
Right.
And he's continuing to bring us together. There's people still flying in as we speak to celebrate outside Paisley for a candlelight vigil later tonight. There's people that need that connection. It's people that never saw Prince in concert anywhere, and they rely on our stories to take them there. And so, as a lover of history and also a wealth of so many experiences out at Paisley as well as in downtown Minneapolis, or crossing paths with them in random places and bunkers or something, we have those things to draw on to share with people for the rest of our life. And I think he would appreciate that, we're sharing the good and focusing on the good. And that's, I think, what I choose to do, not just on, could be a somber day for a lot of other people, but, focus on what he gave us and what we can give back.
Yes.
So.
I love that. On that note, that was perfect. Thank you guys again so much for being here. What I'd like to do, because this is a special show, and I normally on my podcast I have an intro and outro that's pre-record and all that, I'd like to close out with the same video that I open with. And we'll see you guys on my next show. For all of you tuning in, again, this is Healthy and Wealthy and Wise. I'm Lois Kofi, and we had a special tribute to Prince today. So thank you guys. Comment below with what you liked best. And again, please hit the share button. What these guys talked about, it's all about love, life, and being able to free yourself. I like that. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.